Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Pranam to all the participants. We welcome once again on our fourth day of IKS-TKDL workshop, Traditional Knowledge, Intellectual Property and People's Right. Today, we are very happy. We have with us Madam, Senior Principal Scientist at CSIR-TKDL Unit, Ministry of Science and Technology. So, Madam has extensive experience in the domain of IPR, Intellectual Property Rights, so over 20 years. So, Madam, today we'll talk about two different dimensions to protect our TK, traditional knowledge. One is defensive, another is positive. So, Madam has experience. Madam is also a senior editor of the Journal of Intellectual Property Rights. And before joining TKDL, CSIR TKDL, Madam was patent examiner in Indian Patent Office. So we are very happy. Madam will talk about how we can protect our traditional knowledge between two aspects. So Pranam, Madam, we are very happy. Please start your session. We'll listen.
Thank you, Piyushji. Pranam to all. A very good afternoon. I hope everyone is able to hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll continue with all the discussions that have been happening over the past 3 days. We'll move over to another dimension of the discussions that have been happening relating to the defensive and positive protection of TK, as Piyushji said. So I'll share my presentation. Piyushji, please let me know
Yes.
if it is visible. Is it visible, Piyushji?
No, ma'am. Could you please reshare again?
All right, I'll do it.
Yes. Could you please make it full screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
That work? Is it okay?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
So thank you all for being here. We move over to the discussions, and we will follow the same protocol as we have been following over the time. You know, the question answer session, I believe, will be at the end of the session.
Yes, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So first 50 minutes will be your lecture session. Then we'll go to the assessment session, that is 10 minutes. Then we'll go to question and answer session.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, PSG. So we'll start with something which you may have already heard about, but nevertheless, it would be good to be a part of the discussions here. You have heard about traditional knowledge. You have been hearing about the intellectual property rights. Yesterday, you had a session, and earlier also you talked. You heard about Indian knowledge systems, and of course, more about traditional knowledge. But since we are specifically discussing here a matter which relates to protection of traditional knowledge, we must understand what is the ambit of the subject matter that we are seeking to protect here. Okay? So while traditional knowledge is widely understood, accepted by all, in the context of, in the international context or even in the national context, there is no definition, a proper definition, which is to say that an accepted definition, which is to say this is traditional knowledge. But the World Intellectual Property Rights, wherein discussions about traditional knowledge and IPR have been going on for a very long time in the global context, has a definition, a working definition, which says that it is the knowledge, know-how, skills, practices that are developed, sustained, and passed on from generation to generation within a community, often forming a part of its cultural spiritual identity. So you see there are many facets mentioned here. One is the intergenerational context, and then the spiritual and cultural identity. There may be other aspects also, but so far this is where the definition of TK stands. So when we talk about TK here in terms of protection, what does it include? It includes traditional knowledge. There is the intellectual and intangible cultural heritage. Okay, you may have heard of other terms in the context of traditional knowledge, where you may have heard of traditional cultural expressions, or you may have heard expressions of folklore. So these are also, traditional knowledge or related to traditional knowledge, the kind of information. I'll come to the, explanation later. But if you look at differences between what is traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression, there will be distinct subject matter, but there will be often overlap between the two, where you would not be able to say exactly whether it is traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expression. So by traditional cultural expressions in general, we mean those traditional expressions of traditional culture, okay, simply put. But it could mean any kind of, folk expressions like dance or any other things, even, handicrafts and things like that, which could, come in the form of traditional cultural expression. So we have a large traditional, the tribal population, whose practices also will be included in the form of traditional knowledge. Okay? It can be agriculture, it can be scientific and technical knowledge, it can be ecological knowledge, medicinal knowledge, biodiversity related knowledge, and anything, many other things. Okay. So where do we find such traditional knowledge? There are two sources I will specify here. Why? Because in the context of understanding protection, we need to know where we get the traditional knowledge information from. And in the context of protection too, the extent of protection or the type of protection for these two type of sources would be different. Okay. So what do we mean by secondary sources? Secondary sources will all be all the printed form of the traditional knowledge, like the text, the manuscripts, the palm leaf manuscripts you must have seen. Okay. Then articles in journals and books. So what is a primary source? A primary source are the individuals, communities, families, the actual holders of traditional knowledge. Okay. So in case of secondary sources, I have just put here languages and accessibility. This is one of the challenges I wanted to flag, where when you will understand when we talk about protection, what are the problems. Okay, so you understand that all these ancient texts and manuscripts are present in different languages, different scripts. We have so many languages spoken across India, written across India, and these manuscripts are available. And especially considering evolution of language, even the scripts have changed over a period of time. So you have to keep all this in mind when you talk about the secondary sources or the manuscripts. Okay. So where are these manuscripts present? Under the Ministry of Culture, we have a national mission for manuscripts. They have documented over 50 lakh manuscripts. What I mean by documented is actually they have created basically the their content, like you can search catalogs wherein it is mentioned that what are these manuscripts, what subject area they pertain to. Okay, of these they have digitized 3.3 lakh manuscripts. Okay, it's still a very small number if you see, and they have also published rare manuscripts. So digitization simply means they have scanned all these manuscripts and kept in one place. We understand that manuscripts, as they get older, are not in a physically sustainable form. Okay, and it's very difficult to actually conserve manuscripts. And I have seen many of these libraries which have manuscripts, and a lot of it is already, termite ridden and possibly, kind of not legible any longer, or even at times, you cannot read it because of the lack of clarity. Okay. Yet good work is being done by the National Mission of Manuscripts. Yet again, we'd like to flag that thousands of manuscripts still lie scattered which are not with National Mission for Manuscripts. They are available with these communities, these families, private libraries who have these manuscripts but may not be publicly available. It is known only to the holders of that particular information. Okay. So we also have oral traditional knowledge. This is just to say the other information that I was talking about, where you have community knowledge holders or individual knowledge holders. So we have a large tribal population. This is old census data because no census has been taken after that. But we still have a substantial tribal population in India, and a lot of work is being done by the tribal, knowledge holders in sync with nature. Okay, they have several practices since they live with nature and they assimilate their knowledge and assimilate their practices with their environment and ecology. They have several practices, especially in the context of today's climate change and today's problems that we are facing due to eroding, resources, ecological damage. These practices which are present within these communities may be of great importance, today when we talk about conservation and climate change. Okay, so we have a lot of information relating to agriculture, soil quality, biodiversity loss. These are only few of the things. They have much more information. This is just to tell you give you a snapshot of what kind of information is available. Okay, now this knowledge can be disclosed or may not be disclosed. Okay, sometimes these are traditional information which is kept purely within the communities and not disclosed to anybody else. Reason being, they may be customary practices, they may be sacred practices, they may be associated with certain cultural, social norms due to which they won't be shared with any other people. Okay, so we keep in mind that some knowledge may be available to public, some may not be available to public. Okay? Now we will come to the part why we need to protect this traditional knowledge. Now you have got an idea of what kind of traditional knowledge exists in India. Since it can be disclosed knowledge, it can be undisclosed knowledge, it can be digitized knowledge, it can be knowledge which has been published, which is present in public domain, and at times which are completely secret, which nobody is aware of. Okay, the kind of knowledge again has a lot of expands in the sense that it covers a wide range of domains. Okay, we have folk treatments, folk medicines, very common. Okay, and a lot of people are doing work on that also. Then you see animal husbandry, you see dairy products, you see agriculture, and even metals and materials. We all know that India has a very, very long history of metallurgy, architecture. We have seen our temples, which today, if you look at the temples, we would see that we would think how these temples have been constructed without the tools and implements that we have today or the machinery that we have today, yet these exist. Okay, so we have history of this kind of knowledge available and this kind of actual expressions of those that we can see today. Okay, so we also have this ornament, pottery, and things like that. We also have folk arts and artistic folklore, where I talk about the traditional cultural expressions. Many of these will fall under the ambit of traditional cultural expressions, like performing arts. We have folk dances, folk theatre, folk gestures. I know you come from different parts of India, so you must have heard of the Lavani of Maharashtra, the Kudiyattam, which is a theatrical expression through songs and through, they tell stories. It's a kind of form of storytelling, which from the Kerala. Then you have Bhavai, which is again from Gujarat. So all these expressions are also very much a part of the population who practice this, and also you would find that these are very innovative and creative ways of expressing the knowledge that they have or the information they want to share. Similarly, non-performing arts, you can have painting, sculpture, embroidery, carpet making, and all that. We have heard of so many. I'll just put a few here. You have the Bandhani in textiles, Gujarat. You have Pattachitra. Then you have these Ladakh shinkos. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this is actually relates to the woodwork in Ladakh, okay, which is a very, very unique and a very different way of shaping and designing wood. You find very spectacular designs in the structures that are there in Ladakh, even in homes and even in hotels. Okay, so this is a very specific way. This has also got a geographical indication. I'm sure you must have discussed geographical indication yesterday. So this is subject matter of geographical indication. Okay? So while we talk about protecting traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions, we know what is there to protect, but we also need to understand why we need to protect. Now, there are a few things. A primary thing that I will be talking about here is misappropriation. What do I mean by misappropriation? I'll give you more a wide definition for it, but misappropriation simply means that somebody taking it without the knowledge of the person who holds the information. Okay, so preventing misappropriation, and as I said, all this traditional knowledge and cultural expressions, they have associated spiritual and cultural identity. Okay, it's simply not that two-dimensional knowledge that we see. Okay, so in case there is an agricultural practice where there is a sowing of seed in a particular manner, there will be something associated with it, like during they will first invoke a deity and pray to the goddess or god for a good harvest. Then they may also have some other associated practices like singing songs and doing other things, by which these are all associated of the whole, which is the traditional knowledge or the traditional cultural expression. Okay. Also, when such knowledge gets disseminated or accessed, many a times these spiritual and cultural identity is destroyed. Okay, so that is another need for protecting traditional knowledge. Then protecting livelihood of knowledge holders. All these TKs are associated with their livelihoods. Okay, so if you have a tribal population practicing a certain kind of medicine, it is a part of their earning. So they actually their subsist, their living standard is from the money that they make from the particular trade that they practice, say, for example, folk treatments or folk medicine. Okay, so if this gets lost, then they lose that form of livelihood that they have. Another thing is, by protecting traditional knowledge, it will be easy for us to identify the ownership of TK and maintain the information in a form that is available to all. Most important aspect is also ensuring benefit sharing to the person from whom you take the traditional knowledge. Okay, this is a very important aspect you must have heard. I will explain more about it tomorrow. But benefit sharing simply means that if you're taking information or knowledge from someone, building something over it and getting commercial benefit out of it, in some form, the original knowledge holder who gave you that information must be compensated. Okay, that is benefit sharing. Then, when you access this information, always it is important to take prior informed consent from the knowledge holder. That is, the knowledge holder who gives you this information should be aware of why he is giving that knowledge and what use it is going to be put to. So, as researchers working in the area of traditional knowledge, we have certain things that we must keep in our mind. Like when I'm talking about what is traditional knowledge, what is the need for traditional knowledge protection, and then prior informed consent. All these things, the access benefit sharing, prior informed consent, we will speak more about it tomorrow. But this is a thing that you need to keep in mind as researchers who work in this area. Okay. So as I said, biopiracy. Oh, biopiracy and misappropriation, these are both terms. Biopiracy again would mean taking this materials also, not just knowledge. Biopiracy would mean taking materials also, like plants, genetic resources, which are all related to biological sources. Okay, so whenever somebody seeks some kind of ownership, that is an exclusive IP ownership, like the patents, trademarks, and the geographical indications, and many things you discussed yesterday, over indigenous knowledge, that is the traditional knowledge, for profit. And here what is happening is the person who actually holds the knowledge is not taken, the permission of that person is not taken, or that person is kept in the dark. So this is a form of misappropriation in a sense. It is taking without, it's an illegal way of taking the knowledge from that person. Okay, so this is wrongful exploitation and with no compensation or recognition to the original knowledge holder or the indigenous community or the people who hold the traditional knowledge. Okay, so while coming to why we are needing the traditional knowledge protection, and I'll be talking about traditional knowledge digital library also. And since we are speaking about we give you examples of misappropriation. These are old examples, but it continues to happen till today. Okay, A simple thing such as the wound healing properties of turmeric, which all of us know, which all of us use at home, was applied. A patent was applied for it in the U.S. Patent Office. The patent was granted in 1995, and it took something like 3 years for us to get this revoked. How we had to present evidences in the patent office. So you heard about patents yesterday, so you know that for any patent to be granted, it needs to have three ingredients. What are the three things? It has to be novel, it has to have an inventive step, and it has to have a industrial application. So for novelty purposes and for inventive step purposes, the patent examiner will go through a large amount of information that is already available about that particular domain and see whether it is new or has an inventive step. That is, it is not obvious to a person skilled in the art. Okay. So in this case, although this information was available in our text, they were in languages which were not understandable to USPTO examiners, as well as it was not accessible to them. Okay. They need English translations, obviously, because they do not understand the Sanskrit text or the Tamil text or the Gujarati text that we may have in India. So it took a lot of effort in the sense that we had to go to the patent office. That is, you will have to file the cases at the appropriate courts, that is the National Court of US. And then after presenting the data that was already present in our book, we had to fight the case and get this revoked. Okay, so this took a lot of time. It took a lot of resources. It took a lot of money. And finally, we were able to do it. Similarly, if you look at the case of fungicidal properties of neem, okay, so we all know, we all use the neem plant for neem khali, for instance, for a plant as a fungicide or for a pesticide, okay. This was also applied for in the European Patent Office and again granted, but this took nearly 11 years to get it revoked because they went on getting into review processes. So you can understand the difficulty with which this was revoked. And again, we had to go back to our text and also talk to our farmers, present evidences to the patent examiners as well as the court to get it revoked. So also with the basmati rice lines, which were also granted a patent at the USPTO. A more recent example is the skilta, which is the kind of basket that they carry to collect agricultural produce, maybe for instance tea leaves and things like that. Even such a thing for an improved kilta was applied for, though more recently it has been pending for 13 years, but more recently this has been revoked. So now we come to what do we mean by defensive protection and positive protection. Positive protection, we all understand, like you discussed yesterday, for instance, you must have talked about the different forms of IP protection, okay? So what do IP protection have? They have rights, they have legal recourse. So what the protection offers is a legal, that is a law, national protection for a certain set of rights. For instance, in patent law, you have protection over the information, that is the innovation or the invention that you have applied for a period of 20 years from the date of application, okay? So that's a positive protection. That right is given to the owner, and so in case it is infringed, you can go to court and fight a case against the infringer. All right, but such a positive protection for TK, especially in India, we do not have, okay? So what we are doing as an alternate, we are having defensive protection. What is defensive protection? A set of strategies to ensure that third parties do not gain illegitimate, rights over the traditional knowledge. Okay, like for instance, I gave you examples of the neem or turmeric. Now, in that case, if we have the information present in some documented form, that becomes defensive protection. So much of the defensive protection strategies are based on documentation. Okay, so once it is documented, it becomes prior art, and so nobody will be able to take patent on that existing information. Okay. So TKDL is also a defensive protection. I'll explain more about it. But there are some sort of indirect protection which is also provided in various Indian legal provisions, which also I will explain to you. Okay. So what do we need? We need national and international laws. Sui generis systems. Why sui generis system? Sui generis means that's an independent, unique system. Because the existing systems do not allow for protection of traditional knowledge. Why? Because of its unique nature. We'll come to the unique nature later on. Okay. So what are the forms of defensive protection? I have just put many of these information in the slide because this information will be shared with you. I won't be going through all of this, but you can go to the respective sites and have a look at what is the kind of information that is available. Why I'm putting so many different forms? See, defensive protection exists in the sense a lot of traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expressions have been documented over several years by different type of people, by government organizations, by individuals, by universities, by private organizations. But the problem with all this kind of information is it is very scattered, and the kind of information available, for instance, maybe it may be free to you on the internet, or at times it is not freely available. Okay, and there may be overlapping information also. So at times you may find the same kind of information in different databases. Some of the examples I'm giving here. There are central councils which are under the Ministry of Ayush, which cater to the Indian systems of medicine, basically Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, Soaric, Yoga, and all the other things. Okay, they have got out books where they're talking about the biodiversity in India. Basically, it relates to the medicinal plants. So they are like monographs. So you get a lot of information about the plants in these books. Okay. Similarly, ICMR with the National Institute of Traditional Medicine has also got information on ethno-medicinal plants in various regions. Okay, here I give an example of Western Ghats. Similarly, Ministry of Tribal Affairs, you go to their site, you will see a lot of information on various states. Okay, and you will get very detailed information of all this particular states, like in Orissa, what is there in Kerala, and all those things. Several examples, since I work in the area of traditional knowledge in Indian systems of medicine, I've given some examples of the medicinal plant databases, okay, since I'm aware of those. So you have the National Medicinal Plant Board, which comes under the Ministry of Ayush again. They have a very extensive Indian medicinal plant database. What is the advantage of this database? It has got a lot of vernacular names. So whichever place of India you belong to, you may be able to identify the species. It's along with images and also several vernacular names of the same plant, along with the botanical names. Okay. So whether you are a modern researcher or you're a person who is handling or who is a physician or a folk healer, you would be able to get information from this database. Similarly, there are other portals also. These are private portals, so I just thought I would share that also. Honeybee Network also comes under the National Innovation Foundation. They work with them, and they have also got such a database. Okay, so you will get a lot of details from them. One another aspect I wanted to talk about is validation aspect. Now we all know that especially in today's context when everything is evidence based. Okay, so even if you tell that information like this was known in India hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people will ask, where is the proof? Okay, what makes you say that it still works? Okay, so these are very important things because in the current ecosystem, we need to show that all these things work. So, for instance, the ICAR has been working on a lot of this kind of information in agriculture and actually validating the traditional knowledge present in those texts. Okay? So they have done some cross-sectoral work and they have done some experiments. Although I've given this as an example, the Ministry of Ayush is also working on clinically validating this information which is present in Ayurveda texts or Unani texts. Okay? So you'll find a lot of such information also, and there are a lot of medicines also which have come out from these traditional texts. Okay? You must have heard of the artemisinin example on the first day, I believe. So these are things which are actually coming from sources which are actually traditional knowledge. So the TKDL, as I told you, is a defensive database, prior art database. Okay. So you also saw this yesterday, I believe. The Patents Act, according to the Patents Act, you cannot actually per se, take patents on any traditional knowledge specifically, which is already available. One thing that it is already existing, but even if it is an aggregation or a duplication of known properties or traditionally known components, it is non-patentable subject matter. Okay. So again, this is a kind of defensive protection. Although directly no rights have been given to the traditional knowledge holders, we sort of preventing others from taking patents on that, or that is IP rights. Okay. Traditional knowledge digital library as a defensive database. We've been working on this for about 25 years now. It's a database which contains information on Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, Yoga, Soba Rigpa. It is taken from texts in different languages, and we have over 5.2 lakh formulations and techniques from the different systems of medicine as well as yoga. What we do is do not actually translate the information. We take the information from the text, especially the specific information, convert it through, codes basically, and then into a report which will be understandable by any person. Okay, not necessarily a practitioner of that system of medicine. You and I can also understand, because that information is converted in the form of the modern terminologies which are associated with the old text. Okay? So in the old text, you would not find information related to the current modern terminology, but we have introduced that, and that will also be available. It's available in 5 languages and all foreign languages. Why? Because we have been giving it to patent offices basically to prevent misappropriation and so that no wrong grant of patents happens in the area of this traditional knowledge which is present in the Indian text. We also do something related to filing of third-party observations, which are actually evidence-based submissions to different patent offices to tell them that this information is already known. I'll show you some examples later. The significant outcomes of this is that in 375 cases, patent applications have been amended, withdrawn, or abandoned based on the evidences that have been presented from TKDL. Okay. So coming to the actual TKDL, as I told you, we take information from text, we identify the kind of knowledge that we want to transcribe or convert. Then we have a large team of professional people, that is, they are all practitioners of Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha. They either have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. They go through the text, they understand the information, they interpret the information, and put it through codes into an application, a software which has been developed in-house. And all details will be given, but those details will only be what is present in the text, okay, since it's a prior art database. So we will start with information like this. So this is Malayalam. The Hatratnavali is the yoga text in Sanskrit. Then you have a Boti text which relates to Sovarikpa. Here you have Siddha texts which are in Tamil. And this text is actually an Urdu text related to Unani. So we start with information. I mean, some of the languages I have presented here, but we may have done information from Hindi. We may have done knowledge transcription from other texts also, like Bengali and Telugu. Okay. So what we get from there is this structured information. Why we are sticking to this structure? Because this is the kind of structure which is easily searchable by a patent examiner and easily understandable. So it's a easily retrievable information. Okay. So we have a title for the knowledge. Basically, this is a therapeutic formulation. So we have the information on what plants are present, how much of it is present, how it is, the drug is made. Like for instance, here it is written that it's a decoction. Then how it is given to the patient, and it's used in the treatment of what kind of condition. Okay, along with the details of the book, because the book is the actual prior art. So that book information also will be given in the form of, as I showed you, the prior art data, that is the shloka or the verse or the song which is written in the original text. That information will also be given. So what is the USP of the TKDL database? So we start from this information which is there in text, which are not something you and I would understand, because even plants are not described in a manner that everyone would be able to understand. There are cryptic descriptions of plants and ingredients. Okay. So a practitioner only would be able to understand. We have converted that information into the common name, the botanical name. So this information is available in different ways, so that a lot of people will be able to understand this information. Okay, so I just shown you examples. Similarly, the disease description. Now, disease description like headache, appendicitis, all these things are not mentioned in the older text. But okay, there is some symptomatic description which is given, by which you can correlate, you can map what is the condition that is being referred to. In that way, we have also come to modern expressions of the same conditions that are described in the ancient text. So we have, as I said, 5.2 lakh almost formulations. These are from Ayurveda Siddha text. We are also moving on to other things, other besides the systems of medicine. So we are already started information working on agricultural practices. We are also working on traditional metallurgy. Okay? So far, this information is available only to patent examiners. The reason being that we work under a cabinet approval, and currently we had an approval only for giving it to patent offices as prior database. But we do have received approval for widening the access, and probably in the near future, we would be putting in the necessary framework for protection of the data and sharing it with others through subscription. Okay? So as I said, we also have a watch and monitor system by means of which we present third-party observations. So I have given examples over here. All these examples are actually present in our website, so you can go and have a look. So basically what we do is identify the patent applications which have traditional knowledge. We prepare the evidences from TKDL, which actually contest the novelty or the inventive step, present it to the examiner. If he finds it appropriate, he will send it to the patent applicant for explaining why his particular invention is different from this. And if he's not able to answer, obviously the patent application is usually refused. So in this case, this is an Indian patent application which was refused based on the TKDL evidences presented. Similarly, this is a US PTO. In this, we contested only one of the conditions because that's what we could find the description for in the TKDL database. And this particular outcome relates to removal of that claim which related to the use of this the purpurea leaves for diarrhea. Okay. So I just wanted to share some other databases also. So this is all just information for you because you are working in this area. So it is not to say that India has the most comprehensive database. If you talk about the prior art database in the way that the TKDL has been prepared, it's one of the benchmarks. It is one of the earliest and oldest, database to have been created in this form, which finds mention in even global platforms. Okay, but not to say that there are not other such databases, but they mostly are a mixture of the ancient texts as well as they have ancient information. They also have some modern information. In that way, some databases you would find for TCM, you would find it for Korean traditional medicine. The Philippine traditional knowledge, of course, is based on actually the TKDL because the Philippines came to India. They discussed with us how we have prepared, and a lot of the way they have put the information together would resemble the TKDL. Similarly, Malaysia has also put in such a database. Basically, the purpose of most of these databases are to prevent misappropriation of their traditional knowledge. Okay. Also, we need to understand other efforts that are going on in India. The TKDL, as I described, is from the Ministry of Science and Technology as a part of the ongoing work at the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. Also, you would see there is something called the People's Biodiversity Register. This is a documentation that is done by the biodiversity management committees at the village level and taluka level from the information that is available with various knowledge holders. Okay, they are published in the form of books. Now they have also converted it into EPBRs. Now this is done under the Biological Diversity Act. Okay, and the authority which manages this is the National Biodiversity Authority. I'll talk about it more later, even tomorrow, because they also have an important role in access and benefit sharing and also protecting traditional knowledge. Associated traditional knowledge, that which is associated with biodiversity. Okay, so this kind of information is also present, but this information also is not publicly available. Okay, so there are advantages of the defensive protection and there are concerns. Advantages, we have discussed it, so we know what are the advantages. It will prevent erroneous grant of patent or any kind of intellectual property because it's a documentation, it's a prior art. It will preserve valuable heritage. We know that we are losing all our valuable heritage, one, because the books and the texts are disappearing. The people who understand the languages are passing away. The younger generation do not want to hold on to the heritage. So there are a lot of ways that this is actually getting lost. So preserving that valuable heritage, and also identifying the knowledge holders. But what are the concerns? Okay, now we are making this readily accessible. Will this trigger more misappropriation? In the age of digital age of internet, can this cause more misappropriation? Because there are ways in which they can be misappropriated which they have not thought before. Okay, so that's one question that comes to mind. Then, if there is it was taken from a person or a community, did they take prior informed consent? Now, once you've created or put into the form of a database, who will have control over the information? Is it the custodian who has created the database, or the actual owners of the traditional knowledge? Then extent of access. Now you have undisclosed TK, you have disclosed TK, you have the TK which is available in public domain. Okay? To what extent the confidentiality needs to be maintained? That also needs to have clear understanding, because it should not so happen that something which is undisclosed you have published, and thereby the original TK holder has lost a way of actually making some monetary benefit out of it, or gaining some kind of IP. Then safeguarding the information. Given the technological advances, they are really very difficult for us to imagine in what ways such information can be hacked or taken away. For instance, if we talk about genetic resources, the access of these genetic resources need not be physical. Okay, we have all heard of digital sequence information. So even if you take that digital sequence information and do R&D, we could clearly say that no, I didn't take it from anybody. So that access is not physical. Okay, so these are the type of concerns that come today. When we talk about positive protection, I told you there is no exclusive law for traditional knowledge in India. But are there these intellectual property rights applicable? So it's something to think about, okay? But there are certain features of the traditional knowledge which do not allow it to be fit into these molds of intellectual property. What are those? Traditional knowledge is never novel, okay? Traditional, the term traditional doesn't indicate that it is old, okay? Traditional knowledge is an ever-evolving knowledge. It is not static, it's dynamic, it's a living knowledge, okay? Yet you could not differentiate the novel and the new part of it, okay? So it is not necessarily novel information. All the intellectual property rights will have an element of novelty or newness associated with it, which doesn't exist, except for maybe things like plant variety protection, wherein you could also protect extent varieties or geographical indications, where we talk about giving brand value to existing information or existing practices that are present, or even like agricultural produce. Okay, but and also these are often community owned. Community owned, so there is no single ownership that you can identify. Okay, so it's not like it is individually owned, like in most cases, except maybe for geographical indications where there are associations which have the protection. But in case of patents, copyrights, designs, you will have individual people owning it, or an applicant in the form of a company, okay, as in the singular legal entity. Okay, such things cannot be identified for a traditional knowledge. So these are challenges. So do we have Government of India? There are any legal provisions framework? Again, I have put all these things. You have heard of a lot of these things already, okay? But are these applicable to traditional knowledge? Okay. Geographical indications you heard of, it is for protecting a product, okay? Product in the sense, like for instance, you talk about Darjeeling tea, you talk about textile like Kanjivaram saris. These are protected by geographical indications. I also mentioned that Ladakh woodwork, which is protected by geographical indications. But again, here it is the product that is protected, in the sense that that product from some other area, because it has a territorial context, and somebody else who is not within the association cannot claim it as a geographical indication and give it that particular name. Okay, but the underlying traditional knowledge which is present in it is not protected. Similarly, in designs, you could protect motifs. You can protect certain jewelry and forms which are actually in the form of some artistic expression. Okay, and then in copyrights, of course, the songs, the dance forms, and certain aspects of those also can be protected by copyright. Plant varieties, as I said, there can be extent varieties protected. In the Biological Diversity Act, why I put it here is that it has some restrictions towards access of the biological resources and associated traditional knowledge. So again, it's an indirect protection. Similarly, you have this Forest Rights Act. But when you talk about IP rights, there's one important aspect which, is not favorable to the protection of TK. All these have a finite time associated with it. For instance, patents is granted for 20 years, a copyright will be granted for the lifetime of the author plus the 60 years. But as I said, traditional knowledge is a living tradition. Okay, it is over generations. It cannot have a finite protection time. It has to be indefinite, and that is the way the persons who have the knowledge, that is, for example, the knowledge holders would believe. Okay, so that is a disadvantage, and probably why one more reason why traditional knowledge does not fit into the IP frameworks that are existent. Okay, this also I have given just few examples. This is an example for you to understand that national regimes do exist. In India, we do not have. We have made several attempts in the past to have TK protection, but somehow these have not come to fruition. They have gone to the parliament. They have been discussed, but somehow it cannot be converted into a law. Okay, they just remained as bills, and the conversion didn't happen. But we do have other provisions like the Peruvian law. They protect collective knowledge which is present with the indigenous people. Again, here it is, of course, connected to biological resources. So if you see traditional knowledge, it's not necessarily associated with biological resources. Okay, there could be other aspects also. But here they have a law which recognizes the rights of indigenous peoples and communities. Similarly, they talk about prior informed consent. They talk about the distribution of benefits. Also, they talk about registries. And more importantly, it allows for infringement actions, okay, which we do not have in India. Similarly, there are regional regimes. Okay, this is one of the African regimes. Why they have a regional regime? Because many of the African countries cross border, they have similar traditional knowledge. So it's very difficult for them to distinguish that it belongs to this country or it belongs to that country. So they created a regional regime and then decided that it can be implemented at the national level so that the protection of TK and TCs take place. Okay, so they have it for that which is knowledge which is preserved and transmitted over in a traditional intergenerational context. See, all of these people also have a customary context. Okay, in India, maybe that customary context is not well defined because for us, traditional knowledge does not necessarily reside only with the tribal communities. You and I also could have some traditional knowledge in our possession. Okay, so that customary context is not there, but in the African countries or some other countries, customary context is also there. Here, they have also provided right holders certain rights. Okay, recognition, authorization to prevent. They can prevent people from using it without consent and all those things. And again, they have provisions for infringement. Okay, so as a last slide, I just want to talk to you about the international, the current global scenario. Okay, I told you we don't have a law. Okay, in India, there are other countries which have laws, but there has also been a lot of effort at the international context for creating a binding regime for traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions under the aegis of the World Intellectual Property Organization. What they have been meaning to do is create a binding regime, that's a legally binding regime, but with in the context of intellectual property rights, so that a proper balance is maintained between the rights of the indigenous knowledge holders or the traditional knowledge holders and the people who want to take intellectual property rights. Okay, but why we are looking at an international regime? There are some reasons. Whatever national law we have will be a in the territorial context within the country. Okay, so they have limited impact. When you have an internationally binding regime, then it has more wider context and wider, you'll be applicability over a wider range of countries. Similarly, the commercial context, commercial use beyond the traditional context also needs to be addressed because you have misappropriation and misuse not happening only in India, you have it happening all over the place, different countries in the global context. Okay. Also, having such a binding regime would help to establish some minimum standards. The national laws can have higher standards, but at least a set of minimum standards would be in place so that will at least be adhered to. Okay. So there is a committee called the Intergovernmental Committee, which has been discussing the negotiating binding regimes for traditional knowledge, for traditional cultural expressions, and genetic resources. Okay, so an instrument for genetic resource and associated TK instrument, of course, with very limited applicability, was concluded in the last year into 2024. Although it needs to be ratified by the enough number of countries to be enforced, so it is not really enforced so far. Okay, TK and TCE are still under discussion. No consensus has happened because it's a very a big divide or a gap between the has and the have-nots. Okay, the people who have traditional knowledge and genetic resources with them, and those who do not have them. Okay, because they are the ones who want to take this intellectual property rights, and these are the ones who want to gain the rights over their knowledge. So there is a very distinct divide between a rights-based approach and a measures-based approach. Okay, so these because of these distinctions, no consensus has come so far. Okay, but by having a sui generis law, so what we would be able to do is empower the communities, promote traditional knowledge, control access. Okay, because commercial exploitation then without consent would not happen. There would be provisions in place, mechanisms in place to prevent these things. And of course, enhance research and development. It is not to say that these things, if they are with the traditional communities, they should remain there. It is for the benefit of mankind. So there should be R&D on that, but in a manner that is done in the right way, okay, for which we would need particular laws. Okay, that is the protection, a positive protection of the traditional knowledge that is available with us. So I will stop here. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Piyushji, I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Pranam, ma'am. Bahu bahu dhanyawad for your informative session. Madam, with your permission, we just complete the assessment, then we'll come back to the discussion part. Okay. So we request all the participants, please complete the assessment within 10 minutes. I am sharing the link in the chat box, and I will upload the same in the Google Drive folder also. So please complete your assessment quickly. Then we'll come back to our question and answer session. You have another 2 minutes. Please complete your assessment. Then we'll start. Pranam Arye. Pranam, madam. So,
Namaste.
um,
Namaste, Vijayalakshmi ji. Namaste.
so we request all the participants, please put your question in the chat box. We are here. We can address your question.
Piyushi, should I take one, which is by Dr.
Yes,
Charulata
please,
Londe?
please, Arye. Correct.
So, yeah, so she's saying that I'm from Faculty of Social Science and intended to document a TK in textile. Any online site, will it come under the TKDL? Can you suggest a sample for reading of a document of TK, consent form, template of a document, etc.? Where to read about such TK documents? I'm looking for guidance.
Okay, so I'll answer backward. Some information about the prior informed consent, how to record, all those things will be there in tomorrow's presentation because we'll be talking about ethical documentation of the information. So you will get some a lot of material that I'll be discussing tomorrow. Regarding whether any such documentation is entered in TKDL, actually TKDL, the way we take information into the TKDL is through a common task force, and it is decided by the experts in the domain. So we don't have external entry. What we do is we have a particular committee which looks through the information that is available, and then we decide what information goes into TKDL. Okay. So the documentation that you are talking about, you will have to keep in mind certain things we talk about tomorrow, because whether it is disclosed information, undisclosed information, whether it is going to affect the livelihood by you documenting or you publishing or disseminating it. So we'll have those discussions tomorrow. Maybe more of your questions be answered in tomorrow's session. Thank you.
There was also a question here by somebody who's written as RS. So he's asking, how does the ethical component be managed through the effort to provide, protect, promote valuable traditional information? A very important question. The whole ethics of this
Yeah.
knowledge.
So tomorrow's session will be entirely on ethics. So I think all those things will be answered. Maybe if I don't cover any topic, then maybe we can discuss it at the end of tomorrow's session. I think that would be better, because it is solely for the ethical handling of traditional knowledge. Thank you.
And we also have here, are there any questions? Is there anybody who'd like to raise their hand and unmute and ask? Piyushji?
Yes, let me check.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, there are some requests. I can unmute one by one.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I ask the question?
Please go ahead.
Ma'am, is the poetry in
Priyanka.
regional language is the matter of copyright or not?
I will have to understand the context. Copyright in what sense? Sorry.
Means like poetry which are done in regional language, like there is a language in the Malwa region of Madhya Pradesh, which is known as Malvi.
Yes.
So it is the matter of copyright or not? Shairi, poetry and storytelling in the Malvi language
It is
of that particular region of...
Yeah. If I talk in general about subject matter which can be copyrightable, such subject matter will be under the ambit of copyrightable subject matter. Okay, it doesn't matter what language it is in. That is not the criteria for a copyright. Copyright, as you must have heard yesterday, will be available to any subject matter which has that those things of creativity, originality, and all those things. Okay, so it has to fulfill the criteria for the copyrightable subject matter. So poetry, be it in any form, in any language, is copyrightable subject matter. Okay, provided it fulfills. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
I'll just ask a question from Pranjalji. He's saying, hello, ma'am. What if these primary knowledge that you've talked about is being altered by cultural and historical influence? So how could we conclude them as primary source?
Even if it is being altered by whatever cultural or whatever influence that you're talking about, see, if as long as it remains within the community and the community is imbibing that influence, and actually maybe that knowledge is evolving, it's still a part of the community's experiences and practices. So it would still remain the primary knowledge. By secondary knowledge, I simply mean that which is already documented, printed, or brought into some fixed form. Okay, that is the kind of secondary knowledge. As long as it remains within a community or a people or individual, even evolving knowledge will still remain primary knowledge. Thank you.
May I ask the question, ma'am?
Please.
Yeah, good evening. Ma'am, as I understand this, defensive protection, it's very heartening to know that, TKDL is doing a lot of things. And of course, there are many agencies which are helping you doing it. And it's a very nice thing to happen. But my real concern is the positive protection area, because now the traditional knowledge, who really has it, or probably who have this entire thing with them, they do not have this even awareness about all the provisions. Like now discussing here, the traditional knowledge will remain to PPTs, as if I can be little. But the only problem is do we have any NGOs working on it, or anybody who is actually going to the, not I'm talking about the tribals alone, I'm talking about the traditional knowledge in the real sense, which is really of course, it's so rich and so vast and varied as far as the Indian context is concerned. The positive protection is the biggest gray area that I presume to be. I really would like to request you, what are those activities that probably all of us, maybe now 1,000 of us are here, at least, if not anyone else can do this, what can we do to ensure that this awareness goes and the patents or maybe the respective recourses are taken so that this traditional knowledge is given recognition and they get, because right now we have the economy which is flourishing is not because of the person who has the knowledge, the one who is a middleman is getting the benefit, and that's what actually the scenario is all about. So maybe anything that other than, of course, I really appreciate the TKDL effort. What else is really happening, and probably is there anything that we all can do in whatever limited way? Because now, if one person can do very little in anywhere in any world, so all these guys who are, what can you really suggest us to do this? I will really appreciate that effort to take it forward. All of us should have this mission to do something about it. Thank you.
It's very appreciable that you are actually thinking on those terms. So one way, I mean, the simplest way I can think of is just take this, what you learned here, and try to spread it to even 5 people you have created awareness. Okay. The whole purpose of having such workshops is to create awareness, maybe amongst you at the first level, and then it trickles down to the others who actually have knowledge holders. See, tomorrow's session, we'll be talking about certain ethical principles. And in that case also, it's not just those people who have the traditional knowledge who lack awareness. It is even people like us who work in this area who lack awareness. TKDL is one aspect, but as I told you, there are other ministries also working in the area of protecting traditional knowledge. I talked about the National Biodiversity Authority. Besides that, there are a lot of organizations working. Like I told you about the National Innovation Foundation. What they do is they help people, the grassroots innovators, to gain intellectual property rights over the knowledge that they have. Okay, they actually assist them and they provide support even for patenting and things like that. Okay, so there are many such organizations. If you need such information, I can share with you. But besides that, I think IK is doing a wonderful job, especially in the area of putting this knowledge right from the education system. So it creates an awareness among the people who are at the university level, and I'm sure it will take it. It will go a long way in educating other people about this. Okay. But you may also get some ideas regarding how this is to be done, since you would be a practitioner who's working at the level or the grassroots level or with these knowledge holders. All those ideas would help. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, another question. If we find a knowledge in a nearby tribal community, what is the way to check whether it is already available or register or not? What is the way?
See, there is no such registration happening. As I told you, this kind of traditional knowledge which is available in tribal communities, as I understand, see, there is no fine demarcation or very distinct demarcation between what is already published or present. See, a lot of things, like for instance, I'll just take the example of folk medicine. Okay, the kind of plant and the effect it has on a human body, on certain actions it has, may already be there in an Ayurveda text or a Unani or a Siddha text. Okay, and people who have come across it or have their started practicing that at some point of time would have been converted into the form of a folk medicine. It may be the same as that is written in the text, or it may be different. So in such a case, you would not be able to say that that is a distinct folk knowledge which is distinct from the existing published knowledge. Okay? But where this folk knowledge is there, I do understand that can be very distinct from as an information. Can you repeat the question? I mean, Piyushji?
Yes. One second. Yes, if we find a knowledge in nearby tribal community, what is the way to check?
Keeping that in mind, that it can be distinct or not distinct. I know it's difficult to understand whether it is a independent knowledge that is there with the community. Okay, So where such information you can get from, that is not easy. I mean, because it could be available in any form, like for instance in the ancient text. Okay, so that's one way of looking at it, where you can look through the published text, but it is not easy. But the documentation part that you're talking about, maybe in a general sense, if the person is agreeable and would want that information documented, you could do it in an ethical manner and maintain it, because the actual aspect of whether it is distinct or no would come into existence only after the documentation of both types of information. Thank you.
Yes. We can take another one or two. Otherwise, we'll go to our live interactive session on 25th and 26th. Ma'am, here is a question. Positive protection is agri area. Agri area means agricultural area. I think it may be. Huh? In Indian context, what is the role we can do in this aspect? Positive protection.
Positive protection in agri. Actually, again, to tell you that in terms of intellectual property rights, no patents are allowed over agricultural processes or procedures that are used in agriculture. That's one thing. That's again defensive. But positive protection in that sense, we do have in plant variety protection of extant varieties and farmers varieties. In farmers varieties, it means something which has been traditionally being used. That sort of protection is available, but only for that plant variety, crop variety. Most of the varieties, if you see in plant variety protection, they all relate to cereals, fibers like cotton and things like that. So maize, wheat, all those things, rice, you will find such kind of protection. But again, that is for a very specific aspect, only for the crop variety. There is no protection for agricultural processes, procedures where you're talking about water conservation or a way of, sowing or way of treating the grains to keep it for longer time. There are lots of such practices which are there in agriculture. But since we don't in general have any positive protection for TK, these things also do not get protected. Okay, so we are still looking for that positive protection actually. Thank you.
Can I just ask you one thing in connection with this question itself? So one big challenge that, because I work a lot with this, we work in the Sundarbans through IIT. So one of the challenges that we are seeing that is happening there is the loss of the particular seeds. There is one farmer, for example, who has a seed bank of almost 200 varieties. So once upon a time, those varieties, and they were very indigenous varieties, so they were very resistant also to a lot of the pests, to a lot of the other, the salt resistance, etc. Now, with the homogenization of a particular seed variety, also the Monsanto seeds, etc., there are a lot of problems that are happening. Farmers are having to, buy these expensive seeds. So, is there any provision to protect, in a sense, the rights to have these seeds, grow these seeds, propagate them?
See, seeds propagated, growing, that's what I said. There is a farmer's right. So in case that particular farmer has been practicing that over a period of time, a company like Monsanto cannot come in and say that you cannot do it any longer, because what has happened is the varieties which are more dominant suppress these varieties, and these varieties which are not in the sense that they are not pesticide resistant, or like these varieties, I'm talking about those dominant varieties which the companies are propagating, because of which these old varieties are dying. But we do have gene banks and we have these seed banks and all. Maybe we can get in touch with the NPPGR. They do maintain these particular seeds and all that. So the germplasm and things like that. Maybe somebody from there, like from ICAR, will be able to guide you on how to, hold and propagate these things. As such, in the PPVFRA Act, that is the Plant Variety Protection Act, a provision is there. Farmer can use and continue. No one can stop him from using. But I do understand the problem that you're talking about because of other external factors.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As it is, there anybody else who'd like to ask a question, possibly the last question?
Yes.
Anybody else? All right.
If I can, ma'am, if I can, just 1 second.
Please, please.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Nani, your concern, what you expressed regarding the Sundarban area, I think that's a real problem in many other areas as well. Nice that you have voiced it so nicely. Ma'am, actually, during the discussions, Vijayalakshmi, ma'am, you have said that no, there was no consensus on TK and TC till now, like especially in the legislative bodies and making. So now in the larger sense, because all of you are in the helm of the affairs of this now, what is the way forward for that? Because everything has to flow from something in the administrative processes. So much of effort is going through, but what is the problem actually in getting the consensus in the traditional knowledge and TC area, and where are we really at this stage now?
The lack of consensus that I spoke about is at the international level. I mean, that's a real difficult thing to break. Okay, so if I actually tell you, this has been happening for more than 2 decades. Okay, like nearly 3 decades now that this discussion has been happening at the international level. They did break through on that genetic resources, but I would say it's a very minor victory, because the text that we started with, because I was part of these discussions, so I have some background about these things. But if you see the text that it was started with, where we started, so the final text is, a very, it's a very small victory. We have been able to do only one thing in the genetic resources part, that is disclosure of origin. That is, anybody uses accesses, they have to disclose the origin, and if they have taken traditional knowledge from the any traditional knowledge holder, they have to inform about who is the traditional knowledge holder. And in that also there are some exceptions. Okay, and if somebody violates these things under Indian law, actually, if you don't disclose, we can actually revoke patents. Okay, that's a ground for revocation. So we have such a strong law. But somehow in the international context, that didn't happen. They said the revocation can happen only if it is fraudulently done. Okay, so that's a caveat. So in India, it's not that it is fraudulently. If you don't disclose, then your patent can be revoked on that. So those such stringent things are required. But then if that lack of consensus is because there are people who want to have intellectual property, want to make commercial profits out of it. And the loss is of the traditional knowledge holder. Okay, but then there are countries who support us, like India is one, this group. Then we have the South Asian countries like Indonesia and all these people who are very strongly supportive of a positive regime for protection of TK and TCs. Also the African countries. But you understand how things happen at the global level. It's all, these things are always by consensus. So even if there are 4 people who disagree, then it cannot it cannot come into enforcement. So that will never happen. So everybody has to agree. So that is taking a very long time, and I think it will continue to take some time.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. And this regional regime, why don't we go for regional regime? In that case, there are so many things which are overlapping in India where we don't need to really go for one specific area. Why can't we do that?
Some things we have done. If you note, I told you in a form, maybe not in the positive sense, but we have tried to protect the rights of the traditional knowledge holders. Like I said, there is provision for the access and also benefit sharing in the National Biodiversity Act. Okay, now Biological Diversity Act there, but of course it is related only to the biological diversity. That is one thing. But if you see, many of the traditional knowledge is actually associated with some form of this biological resource. Okay, but yet that is one restriction, and they have tried to some extent expand the scope to having all these things, associated traditional knowledge in the NBA. So that is one way. Then they have done these things where they are preventing people from taking this. That's what I said. The thing is, it is territorial. Okay, we can do a lot of things in the national level, but it will again be restricted only to our country. Okay, somebody can do this outside India, we would not be able to do anything. So that is what we want, that there has to be an international regime. So in some way, we would be able to bring everybody under the ambit of this, the kind of minimum standards that I spoke about. So that's a difficult thing. But I think in the Indian context, we have done certain things. But yes, we have not been able to get a TK law. That has not happened. But there's a lot of work going on in that area. I'm sure more work will be done, and maybe in the near some future point of time, we would have some TK law in India. Very important to us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Sorry, can I just respond one thing to what Srinivasji has asked earlier about, reaching these TK protection acts all the way down to the grassroots. So I was just, and what he had also mentioned that I think there is a requirement. That's the reason why IKS is so required in the mainstream education, because then if teachers, they introduce research, working with community, because that's where there's going to be the symbiotic give and take of their knowledge enhanced with the contemporary STEM subjects, etc., with research and all, and then go back to them to see how they can improve their livelihood option with these advanced techniques. So in that context, what I was just would like to add is that if you can take up, that's the reason we at the IKS division offer a lot of these projects where you can apply for grants for research, you can apply for internships, institutional internships, and undertake these projects to really work with community so that your awareness of these rights and laws can percolate down to their protection and also the preservation and development of those so that they become the beneficiaries.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yes, that is a possibility and we must try that. Thank you.
Yes. Vijayalakshmi, there were two questions I noted. Would you want to address them?
Yeah, please.
What is the thing? So there's just one by Vinodji who's saying that if any social NGO wants to document traditional knowledge at the village or block level, are there any official guidelines or ethical rules issued by the ministry to support and regulate this process? Also, is there any certification or certification system or license required for individuals or organizations interested in carrying out such documentation work?
So the whole problem is there are no guidelines and no SOPs in place. That is why this rampant, non-ethical way of documentation is happening. Okay. So while the ministry does this work that I told you about at the local taluka level, that's a pretty particular activity. Okay. So in case you do feel like doing this, maybe you can get yourself associated with them because they also do it through other people, because that's a very vast job. So at the BMC level, just try and find out who is at the biodiversity management committee level, and maybe you can get in touch with them and see how to take the work forward. That can be done.
There was also a related question by one Hemlata ji, but there was another question by Debarati. Wait, this was a PhD student, and then I think we should close after that.
Yes.
Suddenly there are many questions at the end here. Sanskrit Vyakarana, 5 years. Can I have an
Don't worry.
interdisciplinary research?
I am collating all those
Piyush has
questions.
taken.
We'll
Okay, then
address.
I think we can close here
Yeah,
because there is no end to these questions coming in. So I'm sure that they will be addressed. Yes.
कृपया समापनं करोतु शान्ति मन्त्रेण अहं करिष्यामि.
Okay.
हरि ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Yes. We pranam to all the participants. See you tomorrow. Pranam, madam. Pranam, Arye. See you tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.